The text came in at 6:47 in the morning from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't go to the party tonight. Check your husband's home office first, bottom drawer, behind the files." I stared at it for a long time, standing in my kitchen in my socks, coffee going cold in my hand. My first thought was that someone had the wrong number. My second thought was that it was spam, some new kind of phishing thing, weirdly specific. I almost deleted it. Almost. I set the phone face down on the counter and told myself I was being ridiculous. Tonight was my sister's engagement party. We'd been planning it for 3 months. I'd ordered the cake from that little bakery in Westmount, the one she'd pointed to 6 years ago when we walked past it in the snow, and she'd said, "Someday, someone's going to order me a cake from there." I wasn't going to let a random text from a blocked number derail any of that. I picked up my coffee, took a sip, and immediately picked the phone back up. I read it 4 more times. The thing is, my husband had been strange lately. Not dramatically strange, not movie strange, not coming home with lipstick on his collar or suddenly buying new cologne. Just quieter. Distracted. He'd started closing his home office door when he worked in the evenings, which he never used to do. I mentioned it once, and he'd said he was just trying to focus, that a big project was coming up. I believed him. Or I told myself I believed him, which I've since learned is not the same thing at all. His name is Kevin. We've been married for 9 years. We have a daughter named Lily who is 7 and obsessed with marine biology and keeps a running list on the fridge of every shark species she's learned about. We have a mortgage in Point Claire, a used Subaru, a cat named Biscuit who hates everyone except Lily. We have a life, a real, full, ordinary life. And I was standing in my kitchen at 6:47 in the morning, wondering whether to open my husband's desk drawer. I went upstairs. I told myself I was going to prove the text wrong. I was going to open that drawer and find nothing but old phone chargers and take-out menus and whatever other junk accumulates in the junk drawer of a person's work desk. I was going to laugh at myself, finish my coffee, and spend the rest of the day helping my mother set up decorations at the reception hall. The home office was tidy, the way Kevin always keeps it. Framed photo of the 3 of us at Peggy's Cove on the desk. A half-drunk glass of water. His laptop closed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, feeling absurd, feeling like I was crossing some line just by being in here with intent. I crossed it anyway. The bottom drawer stuck a little when I pulled it. It always does. The wood swells in winter. I yanked it open and found exactly what I'd expected. A stack of manila folders, some receipts, a power bar still in its packaging. I almost closed it right then. My hand was on the drawer handle, and I almost pushed it shut and walked away and never knew. The folders were labelled in Kevin's handwriting. Tax 2022. Tax 2023. Insurance. And then one that wasn't labelled at all. Just a plain manila folder, thicker than the others, tucked at the very back. I pulled it out. Inside was a printout of a conversation. Hundreds of messages organized by date going back almost 2 years. I recognized Kevin's number at the top. The other number wasn't saved with a name. I started reading and I had to sit down on the floor because my legs stopped working. The messages were between my husband and my sister's fiancé. His name is Derek. He's 38 years old, works in commercial real estate, drives a truck he's too proud of, and 6 weeks from now we're supposed to stand at the altar of St. Andrew's Church on Sherbrooke Street and marry my sister, Noelle. The messages told a different story. I won't go through all of it. I can't, even now, not without my chest doing that thing where it forgets how to be a normal chest, but the short version is this. Kevin and Derek had been involved in something that started as a business arrangement and became something else entirely. There were references to a condo downtown, one I didn't know Kevin had any connection to. There were transfers of money, amounts that made my vision go strange, that I had to read twice and then a third time. $30,000, $18,000, $42,000. Moving between accounts I didn't recognize in a pattern that made my stomach turn. And there were photos, not the kind I feared at first, It wasn't that kind of betrayal. It was almost worse in some ways because it was colder. The photos were of documents, legal documents, papers I didn't understand fully, but enough to know that Kevin had been helping Derek move money in ways that were not legal, enough to know that my sister, brilliant, trusting, so deeply in love Noel, was about to marry a man who was using our family as cover. There was a line in one of the messages from Derek to Kevin dated 4 months ago. "Once we're family, it'll be even easier to move things through. She doesn't ask questions. You know how she is. She doesn't ask questions." He meant my sister. I sat on the floor of Kevin's home office for a long time. The cat came in and sat beside me, which he never does, and I put my hand on his back and just breathed. Outside, I could hear the street starting up, a neighbour's car, someone's recycling bins being dragged to the curb. The ordinary sounds of a Tuesday morning in November. My phone buzzed. My mother, heading to the hall at noon, "Can you bring the ribbon from the craft room?" I typed back, "Of course," and sat there. Here is what I want to tell you about that moment, because I think it matters. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. What I felt was something much colder and much steadier than crying. It was the particular feeling of a floor falling away and your body somehow already knowing how to stand on what's underneath. I had been in this house for 7 years. I had cooked in that kitchen and helped Lily with her homework at that table and watched the snow fall from that window, and all of it had been built on something I hadn't been allowed to see. But I could see it now. I took photographs of every page in that folder on my phone. I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it. I closed the drawer. I smoothed the front of my shirt, picked up the empty coffee cup I'd apparently carried upstairs without noticing, and went back to the kitchen. Then I called my cousin Alicia, who is a paralegal and the most unshakable human being I have ever met in my life. She answered on the second ring. "I need you to look at some documents," I said. "Today, before tonight." She didn't ask why. That's the thing about Alicia. She just said, "Send them." I forwarded the photos. 20 minutes later she called me back. "Nat," she said, which is what she calls me. "This is money laundering, I already knew." Hearing it said out loud in her voice, calm and precise, made it real in a different way. She walked me through what she was seeing, the structure of the transfers, the way the condo had apparently been purchased and resold in a pattern that served no legitimate purpose, the references to a numbered company that she was able to pull up in the Ontario registry in about 4 minutes flat. Kevin's name wasn't on anything directly, but his fingerprints were all over it. He'd been the conduit. The friendly brother-in-law-to-be who didn't ask questions either. "What do you want to do?" Alicia asked. That was the question. Because what I wanted, what every instinct in my body was pulling me toward, was to walk into that home office and confront Kevin right then. Throw the folder at him and watch him try to explain himself. But Alicia, who thinks more clearly than anyone I know, said the word evidence 3 times in the next 60 seconds, and I heard her. "Come to the party," I said, "and bring your husband." Her husband is a Crown attorney. I spent the rest of that morning moving through the house as if everything were normal. I helped Lily get ready for school. I made Kevin breakfast. He kissed me on the cheek before he left for work and said he'd meet me at the hall at 5, and I smiled and said, "Sounds good." The moment the door closed behind him, I had to grip the kitchen counter with both hands and just stand there, because the weight of what I was carrying was immense. But I had somewhere to be. My mother had done beautiful things with the hall. It was one of those old banquet spaces in the West Island that still has crown moulding and proper tablecloths, not the plastic and folding chair aesthetic of so many event venues. She'd strung warm lights everywhere, put eucalyptus on the tables, found the exact shade of dusty rose that Noel had shown her on Pinterest in what felt like a different lifetime. My sister was coming in at 4 with Derek, not knowing any of it, expecting the best night of the recent stretch of her life. I helped my mother hang the ribbon. I answered questions about centerpieces. I texted Alicia twice, and she replied both times with just a thumbs up. Noelle arrived at 3:45, 45 minutes early, because that's who she is. She walked through the door in a cream-coloured dress and her hair done the way she saves for occasions, and she stopped when she saw the room and put both hands over her mouth. My mother started crying. I hugged my sister so hard she laughed and said, "I can't breathe, Nat," and I said sorry and didn't let go for another few seconds. Derek was behind her. He shook my hand, the way he always does, firm, practiced, the handshake of a man who wants you to know he's confident. He had that easy smile that I'd always taken at face value. He said, "You guys outdid yourselves," looking around the room, and I said, "We really did," and looked right at him. He didn't notice anything. Kevin arrived at 5 with a bottle of wine and a story about traffic on the 40. He hugged Noelle, shook Derek's hand, clapped him on the back. Watching them together, the way they moved around each other, easy and familiar, I understood for the first time how thoroughly I had been standing outside of something I thought I was inside of. Alicia came at 5:30 with her husband James. James is quiet at parties. He stands near walls and listens more than he talks and notices things. I'd always liked that about him. That evening I was counting on it. I found a moment alone with both of them near the bar at 6. "I sent you more files this afternoon," I told James. I'd spent 2 hours that afternoon pulling everything I could find in Kevin's home office. Old bank statements, a notebook with figures written in the margins, a second folder behind the first one that I'd somehow missed. I'd photographed all of it. James nodded once. "I saw them." And he looked at me steadily. "You did the right thing calling us." That was all he said, but it was enough. The party moved through the evening the way parties do. Speeches, laughter, someone's child running between the tables, that particular warmth of a room full of people who are glad to be in the same place. Noelle glowed. She's 5 years younger than me, and we spent most of our childhood sharing a room in a drafty semi-detached in Dollar des Ormeaux. And watching her that night, so happy, so entirely unknowing, it was almost unbearable. I had told myself I'd wait until after the toast. My uncle gave the toast at 8. It was warm and funny and a little too long the way his toasts always are, and when he finished, everyone raised their glasses, and Noelle pressed her face into Derek's shoulder, and I watched Kevin watch them, and I thought, you knew what he was. I set down my glass. I caught Alicia's eye across the room. She gave a small nod. I walked to where my sister was standing, and I took her by the hand, and I said, quietly, "I need to show you something. Just us for a second." She read my face. That's the thing about sisters. She read my face in half a second, and the happiness in her eyes shifted into something careful and frightened. "What's wrong? Come with me." We went to the small anteroom off the main hall, the one with the coat hooks and the folding table they use for sign-in. I had the folder with me, the printouts I'd made that afternoon of everything Alicia and James had helped me understand. I put it in my sister's hands. I won't describe what happened in that room in detail, because it belongs to her, that moment, not to me. I'll say that she read it standing up, and she stayed standing the entire time, and that's the most Noelle thing I can possibly imagine. I'll say that when she looked up at me, her eyes were dry and her jaw was set, and she said, "How long have you known?" "Since this morning." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "He knew Kevin was involved?" "Yes." Another silence. "The line about me," she said. "That I don't ask questions." I couldn't say anything. She already had the page. She'd already seen it. "Okay," she said. She straightened the papers in the folder and handed it back to me. She smoothed the front of her dress. She reached up and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. "Okay," she said again. And she opened the door and walked back into the party. What happened next took about 4 minutes. I've replayed it so many times that it feels longer, but Alicia told me afterward it was under 4 minutes. Noelle walked to where Derek was standing with a group of her friends, laughing at something, his hand on the small of the back of a woman she'd trusted since university. He looked up when he saw her coming. He smiled. She said his name once. Then she said, clearly enough that the people immediately around her went quiet, "I know about the money. I know about the condo. I know about Kevin." She paused. "And I'm going to need you to leave." Derek's smile stayed on his face for a genuinely strange amount of time, like a screen that's been unplugged but hasn't gone dark yet. Then it went away entirely. "Noelle used my family," she said. "Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly, the way you state something that is simply true. You looked at us and you saw something useful. And I need you to leave now." He tried. He said her name again. He looked around the room for support and found none, because by then the quiet had spread and people were watching, and James had materialized beside Alicia near the entrance in a way that was not accidental. Derek started to say something about discussing this in private. "There's nothing to discuss," Noelle said. "This is over." He left. I stood by the anteroom door and watched my sister stand in the middle of that beautiful room with the warm lights and the eucalyptus, and I watched the people who loved her close in around her, and I thought about the text I'd received at 6:47 in the morning from a number I still don't know. I've thought about it a great deal since then. I did call the number back that same night from the parking lot while Alicia stayed with Noelle inside. It rang 4 times and went to a voicemail that was just a default recorded tone, no name, no message. I've tried twice more since. Nothing. Alicia has a theory that it was someone Derek wronged before he got to us. James won't say much because there's now an active investigation, but he did say once, carefully, in that way he has, that Derek's business practices had drawn attention before. Someone, somewhere, knew what was coming. Someone decided we deserved a warning. I don't know if I'll ever find out who. Kevin is no longer living in the house in Point Claire. That's all I'll say about that for now, except that Lily still has her list of shots on the fridge, and Biscuit still hates everyone but her. And some mornings I stand in the kitchen with my coffee, and I think about how close I came to deleting that text and walking out the door into a life that was already gone. Noelle is doing better than I would have, I think. She went back to work the following Monday. She called me 3 nights ago and we talked for 2 hours about nothing in particular. Her new co-worker who microwaves fish in the break room, a book she's reading, whether we should go to Tremblant for Christmas like we used to when we were kids. At the end of the call she said, "I'm glad you came to get me." I said, "Of course." She said, "I mean it. You could have said nothing. You could have decided it wasn't your place." "It was always my place," I said. "You're my sister." There was a pause and then she said, "Yeah," and I could hear in that one word everything she wasn't saying, or the grief and the fury and the slow, hard work of putting herself back together. And underneath it, something steadier. We said goodnight. The engagement announcement is still up on her Instagram. She took it down the morning after the party, put it back up 3 days later with a single sentence in the caption. "Sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust the people who show up." That's it. No explanation. The comments are full of people who know and people who don't, and she hasn't responded to any of them. I don't know who sent me that text. I don't know if I'm supposed to. Maybe some things come to you anonymously because the universe has decided you need to see them, not that you need to understand where they came from. Maybe someone out there is watching to see what people do with the things they're given. I checked. I found it. I didn't walk out the door and leave my sister to that. Whatever comes next, the investigations, the lawyers, the long, uncertain unraveling of a life I thought I understood, I can stand in the middle of it and know that when it mattered, I opened the drawer. I keep coming back to the moment I almost put the phone down. 6:47 in the morning, a text from a number I didn't know and a choice that looked on the surface like almost nothing. Delete it or don't. Go upstairs or don't. Open the drawer or don't. And yet every single thing that followed, for me, for Noelle, for the people who'd built something dishonest and called it a life, came down to that one quiet moment in my kitchen. I think about cause and effect a lot differently now than I used to. Not in a mystical way, not in a everything happens for a reason way, because I'm not sure I believe that. But in the plain, observable sense, things have consequences. Choices accumulate. What Kevin and Derek built together didn't collapse because of bad luck or bad timing. It collapsed because two people made a series of deliberate decisions to deceive, to use, to look at the people closest to them and see tools instead of human beings. And those decisions had a weight that eventually became unsupportable. That's not fate. That's just how it works. And Noelle standing in that hall saying this is over with her voice completely steady, that didn't come from nowhere either. That came from who she is. From years of being someone who faced hard things without flinching, who didn't let grief make her smaller. She had no warning, no time to prepare, and she still stood up straight. I've thought about her in that moment more times than I can count. What it takes to be that clear-headed when your whole world has just been pulled out from under you. That kind of steadiness isn't luck. It's built. Alicia calling things by their right names, James appearing near the entrance without being asked, Noelle reading that folder standing up, me going upstairs instead of deleting the text. None of us did anything heroic exactly. We just did what was honest. We did what the situation required. But I've come to think that doing the honest thing consistently, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's frightening, is what builds the kind of person who can act clearly when it actually matters. You don't become trustworthy in a crisis. You either already are or you aren't. What I know now is this: the people who lied to us didn't suddenly become dishonest the day we found out. They'd been making those choices for months, maybe longer. And we didn't suddenly become capable of handling it. We'd been building that capacity all along in smaller moments, in quieter choices, without knowing we'd ever need it. I opened the drawer. Alicia read the documents. Noelle walked back into the room. None of us hesitated for very long, and I think that's because somewhere in us we already knew what the right thing was. We just had to be willing to do it. That text could have gone to anyone. It came to me. I want to believe I was ready for it. Not because I'm exceptional, but because I'd been paying attention all those years to what kind of person I was trying to be. I think that's the only thing any of us can actually do: pay attention, build something honest. And when the moment comes, open the drawer